morning, respected Father Principal, Reverend Dr. Dominic Xavier, the resource person Dr. Chatterjee, Associate Professor, University of Georgia, the Vice Principals and Deans, and my respected colleagues. We have gathered here for the Faculty Development Program, a seminar on Enterprise Digitization and Cybersecurity, organized by the Department of Computer Science and the Department of Information Technology Commerce in association with the Academic Council and the Internal Quality Assessment Cell of St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. The program is divided into two sessions, the first session being the inaugural session and the second session will be the main business session where Dr. Chatterjee will deliver the talk and interact with the delegates. As the first agenda of the inaugural session, I invite Father Principal Dr. Dominic Xavier to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning to all of you. Dr. Chatterjee, Professor Bertrand De Silva, the Vice Principal Arts and Science, Dr. Topati Datta, the Dean of Science, Professor Swapin Banerjee, the Dean of Commerce, Professor Shalabh Agarwal, the Head of the Department of Computer Science, and you have the IT Head Madhu, and all the professors. I don't think we have any students here. All of them are. So welcome to this faculty development program. In fact, before I start, I got a email from Dr. Chatterjee 2 weeks back, introducing himself, that he was alumnus of this college, and all this biodata. He said he would be very, very happy to come and address the students and the staff. So immediately I wrote back, see students are on holiday, we could do something for our staff. So immediately, yes, no problem. Then I gave the whole mail to Professor Shalabh Agarwal. So everything was done in 2 days. So here we have Professor Chatterjee. It gives me great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome on behalf of St. Xavier's College to this faculty development program. We deem ourselves privileged to have Dr. Chatterjee as a resource person for this seminar, and we hope to have a brainstorming session for the day. Dr. Chatterjee, as you know, is an associate professor in the MS department of the Terry College of Business, the University of Georgia. He is a world-renowned technology thought leader and business strategist. He also happens to be an alumnus of our college, and we thank him for coming forward to spend some quality time with our faculty members. It is the ongoing tradition and legacy of St. Xavier's College to associate with the distinguished scholars and provide our faculty members and students with the opportunities to develop themselves and keep up with the upcoming events. It has always been our persistent endeavor to provide our faculty members at all times the best platform to interact and deliberate with eminent personalities and the latest development throughout the globe. This seminar is one such instance to enhance our knowledge and acquaint ourselves with happening topics like enterprise digitization and cybersecurity. Enterprise digitization throws light on many facets of digital transformation, including the new technology, architecture, service improvements, and cultural changes that are part and parcel of becoming a digital enterprise. While opportunities abound as new technologies come to market, enterprise will definitely need to transform some of the ways in which they operate. Furthermore, the complexity involved in designing today's technology platforms require deep expertise in a wide array of areas. This is causing a historic wave of collaboration across different industries. These cross-industry partnerships include efforts to build end-to-end solutions that harness the best of each partner's assets and capabilities. Education sector is one such sector which needs digitization in all aspects to provide better and quality service to its students. However, digitization goes hand in hand with the security, which is a vital aspect of any digitization success. As you know, if an enterprise falls prey to cybercrime, digitization efforts soon grind to a halt. And this in turn puts innovation on hold. We need to address the growing dangers and ever more sophisticated attack vectors through 360-degree approach. It is about developing and delivering security in a holistic way from the very outset. Above all, cybersecurity has to be easy and simple, as it will otherwise not to be put into practice. I am sure that the seminar today will help us to understand the basics of enterprise digitization and educate ourselves on the various cybersecurity aspects to secure our organization. Every year, just before the Christmas recess, the Department of Computer Science organizes such a program to enrich the faculty members. This time, the Department of Information Technology, the Academic Council and the Internal Quality Assessment Cell have also joined hands with the Computer Science Department to organize this program. I congratulate all of them, especially Professor Shalabh Agarwal, the HOD of the Computer Science Department, and the directors of the Computer Center and Central Computing Facilities for efficiently coordinating this event. I welcome all of you who have spared their valuable time. I know that most of you are busy with corrections, but still you are able to come here to attend this seminar. At the same time, I advise all of them to enrich yourselves in the eminent presence of Dr. Dev Chatterjee. Once again, I thank Dr. Dev Chatterjee to be with us and share his knowledge. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you, Father, for the important insights for the seminar objectives, and welcoming Dr. Dev Chatterjee and delegates. Now I once again I invite Father Principal to present a flower bouquet and a token of appreciation to Dr. Dev Chatterjee.
That's fantastic. I'll try to thank you so much. And if I can break tradition and present something little to Father from the University of Georgia.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm very welcome.
Thank you, Father, and thank you, Dr. Chatterjee. I hereby invite Professor Shalabh Agarwal, Head Department of Computer Science and Director Computer Center and Central Computing Facilities, to introduce the resource person and the matter for today's seminar.
Good morning, all of you. Respected Father Principal, the Vice Principals, Deans, Dr. Dev Chatterjee, the resource person for today's seminar, my dear colleagues, it is a great privilege for me to introduce Dr. Dev Chatterjee, who has kindly agreed to deliver the seminar for us in such a short notice. And in coordinating this event with him in last few days, I found him to be very meticulous in everything that he was doing. So I have learned quite a lot from you, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Dr. Dev Chatterjee is a tenured associate professor in the MIS department at the Terry College of Business, the University of Georgia. An accomplished scholar and technology thought leader, Dr. Chatterjee's interest and expertise lie in the various facets of technology management, from technology sense making to implementation and change management, data governance, internal controls, information security, and performance measurement. His work has been cited over 1,000 times and published in prestigious outlets such as MIS Quarterly, Journal of Management Information Systems, the Wall Street Journal, MIT Sloan Management Review, and California Management Review, and sponsored by industry. In addition to the scholarly writing, Dr. Chatterjee is a noted speaker, delivering talks around the world, moderating CXO panel discussions, providing consulting and advisory services, and authoring white papers. He has also been recognized as a world-renowned cybersecurity and change management expert for leading Fortune 500 companies. We welcome you, Dr. Chatterjee, to this institution. Now, in very short, I'll just introduce the seminar topic for today. Today's topic is Enterprise Digitization and Cybersecurity, a high reliability organization perspective. The forces of technological innovation and digitization are creating remarkable opportunities for individuals and organizations. From online shopping and banking to Ubering of transportation services, robot-driven smart factories, and 3D printing of prototypes and human organs, the examples of technology-enabled conveniences and transformations are literally endless. While there are numerous advantages to machine and machine-to-human connectivity, these electronic pathways are also conduits for different types of cyber attacks. From malware to phishing, denial of service attack, man in the middle, driven by downloads, rogue software, the nature of threats keep expanding and organizations and individuals are in a perpetual state of breach. Loss of reputation, tarnishing of the brand, and legal liability are some of the major consequences of such attacks. Individuals whose accounts have been compromised have to deal with ID theft, fraudulent transactions, and loss of privacy. The more digitally enabled and connected organizations and societies get, the greater are the risks for large-scale cyber attacks. How does an organization earn and maintain customer trust amid growing concerns of data safety and security? Adopting a multi-method approach, this talk draws an insight from prior studies and expert surveys to identify 13 success factors and 10 major hurdles in creating and sustaining high reliability organizations. I am sure we will have a very fruitful session today with Dr. Dev Chatterjee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I invite Dr. Anal Acharya, Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Science, to deliver a vote of thanks.
First and foremost, I would like to thank our Principal, Reverend Father Dr. Dominic Xavier, for taking time out of his busy schedule and coming here for blessing the occasions. A big word of thanks also to all Vice Principals for encouraging us to arrange such interactions. Our speaker for the day, Dr. Dev Chatterjee, world-renowned technology thought leader and business analyst, also deserves special mention for delivering this talk in spite of his busy schedule. Finally, a note of thanks to the Academic Council, IQAC, Computer Science and IT departments, and HOD of Computer Science Department, Professor S. Agarwal, for arrangement of today's talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Acharya. With this, we come to the end of the inaugural session. There will be a tea break now, and the business session will commence at 11 a.m. I request all the
Folks, I'm delighted to be here, and I thank Professor Agarwal. I thank the college administrators for inviting me and for giving me such a warm welcome. As you probably know, I am a local boy who grew up in Calcutta, went to school in St. Xavier's, went to college at St. Xavier's, did my bachelor's at BCom. So a lot of great memories, tough days, days of struggle. But great memories, great reverence for the city, its people. I made it a special, it's part of my goal for this trip is to showcase my city. So I have been taking pictures of the Bengali sweets and posting them on Facebook with little write-ups. Because where I stay in the US, you get North Indian sweets. So I want to highlight how much better the Bengali sweets are. Just being a little, biased. But I'm very proud Calcutan. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful interactive session with you all. I like to move around a little bit, so I'm sure that you will still be able to hear me, right? If I move? Fantastic. So, this morning, I'm going to be talking about enterprise digitization and cybersecurity. And I will be talking about this phenomenon from a high reliability organization perspective, HRO. Just to give you a little bit of background and context, in fact, I was impressed with your father's little introductory remark. He touched upon some very important points, very wise points. It is so true that we are getting electronically enabled, electronically connected in every possible way. We are still at an early stage of connectivity, but the reality of it is it's happening. Whether it's a machine-to-machine connection, machine-to-people connection, all kinds of connections are happening. And it is making life, in a way, convenient. We are collaborating, communicating on social media. We are sharing data between companies. Companies no longer operate in isolation. They operate, I like to use the word value chain. So it's always a chain of companies competing as opposed to a single company competing against another company. So competition no longer happens at a company level, but competition happens at a network level. All of that is enabled because of the progress that we have made in digitization. Now, I've been following the digitization phenomena since the mid-90s. In fact, I was sharing with some of your colleagues that my dissertation in the 90s was on the adoption and assimilation of the internet. So I've had the luxury of time to track how technology has been adopted over the years, what mistakes have been made, and so that gives me that extra insight when I explore digitization and look at the cybersecurity implications. While a lot of good is coming out of digitization, hopefully we all recognize, especially people like you who are very literate, who are very aware of this phenomenon, that the more connected we get, the more problems we are likely to create. Imagine a reality where there is no electricity. I was sharing with some of your colleagues that this time we made the trip to India. My son and I came early, and my daughter and my wife were supposed to come and phone in by the end of the week. When they got to the Atlanta airport and they had checked in, they were sitting at the gate. They had a major power outage, and the power outage completely disrupted operations to the point they canceled hundreds of flights. So their travel had to be cancelled, and our planned vacation kind of got ruined. Now, I don't believe that was intended as supposedly a fire caused the problem. But what that highlights is we are so vulnerable to infrastructure disruptions, and we are never fully prepared. I was amazed at how poorly the Atlanta authorities reacted or addressed the issues. Nobody was there to answer any questions. Nobody was there to guide the people. Complete disarray, complete mess. And that tells me that the level of preparedness is slim to none. And I get to travel around the world quite a bit and give talks in different countries. And I gauge that the level of preparedness is poor across the board. And so there are lots of opportunities for improvement. And the least I can do is create these opportunities and have a dialogue with you all so we can hopefully make a little dent. None of us can individually resolve this extreme problem that can come upon us, where water supply can get contaminated. You can lose access to emergency services. You no longer may have access. Just imagine waking up one morning and the bank guy tells you that, I'm sorry, because of system disruptions, we have no idea what you have. You've lost all trace of your transaction. Just imagine. It's possible. Now, from where do you start? What are you going to do about it? In fact, I was recently being interviewed on radio, and I told the interviewer that while I was preparing for my interview, I read an article where Warren Buffett said that he thinks cybersecurity is a greater problem for humanity than a nuclear attack. That's how big or significant the problem is. There's a website, I'm sure you probably have been here. If you haven't, check it out. They constantly update data on the latest cyber attacks, and their metric is more than 30,000 customer records have to be compromised for them to make note of the attack. And from time to time, I go and check what's going on. And they also describe the history of the attacks. So you get to learn, read stories on what caused these attacks. It's very concerning, very, very concerning. And I wonder what is next. So what's going to happen next? And as you know, the future warfare will be fought electronically. I was in Dublin, Ireland, a couple of months ago at a conference, and the keynote speaker had a slide up here, and the slide title was The Cyber Warriors. And what he was showing were people wearing the army uniform, but sitting in front of computers. And most of them were not in great shape. So our visual of the soldiers who are physically in great shape fighting wars is probably the past. The future warriors are the ones who are going to be using the intellect and their technical knowledge to save their country or defend their country. So it's a huge game changer. And companies are kind of getting up to speed on things. Whether it's Italy or whether it's India or any other country, as I conduct research in the area, I see very similar problems. Very vulnerable, very exposed to different types of attack, despite all the tools that's available out there, despite all the progress we have made in coming up with the latest and the greatest, whether it's a firewall, whether it's any other kind of product to sniff, and you know this probably better than I do. All kinds of products out there. And as I said, the level of preparedness is below average at best. So there is a lot that can be done. And even a little impact is better than no impact. That's why I put it on myself to do my part to enhance the level of awareness. And that's why I am here this morning before you. From a business standpoint, are customers concerned? Absolutely. Survey after survey, while customers love convenience, and today's customers are extremely empowered because if they don't like your product, they can go on the internet and they can buy a competing product. And today's customers are actually not very brand conscious. They will go where they get the best deal, and they are pretty aggressive about it. So the onus lies on the companies to try and retain these customers. And to be able to retain the customers, they have to convince them that if you deal with me, we will do our best to protect information about you. I was in San Francisco in the month of May, giving a talk at Salesforce. And subsequent to the talk, I was having a sidebar with their Chief Information Security Officer, Mr. Tahir, and he said something very interesting. He says, Dave, we are the #1 global provider of a platform for customer relationship management. So we have a monopoly out there, no doubt. But even we are worried, we are constantly thinking, what can we do to convince our customers that if they subscribe to our portal, if they subscribe to our platform, that their data is well protected. What can we do, or what should we do? And we had an interesting sidebar. That discussion convinced me even further that the research that I'm pursuing makes a lot of sense. So the question that drives my research is, how does an organization earn and maintain customer trust amid growing concerns of data safety and security? Now you could be wondering, sitting at an educational institution, how is that related to a university? And I'm sure you understand, customers for the university are at the very least students. And student information, if they get compromised, creates problems. In my own university, quite a few years ago, we decided to do away with the social security numbers because that was a major problem, very sensitive data, and if hacked, that data could be used to gain access to credit cards and so on and so forth. But despite every possible effort, the data that I get from our IT people at the university, we have to fend off attacks in the thousands literally every day. So the last couple of years, our systems have been compromised at least twice because we got a public notification that your information has been compromised, please take suitable action. So despite every effort, universities are vulnerable, they are suffering, their students are concerned. So it doesn't matter what's the nature of the organization, the problem is still the same. So my overall research goal is to understand, inform, and enhance the ability of the organization to become highly reliable. So why the word highly reliable? Highly reliable can mean different things. You can think about reliability from the standpoint of providing a reliable service, a reliable product, but here I'm talking about reliability from the standpoint of protecting sensitive data. To be able to carry out this research effectively, I have to go through a process which starts off with an exploratory approach where I interviewed experts in the field, different organizations, collected the data, and conducted some qualitative analysis. Of course, I have to do the literature review to create that foundation. And the next phase that I will be getting into once I return is to launch a large-scale survey. Currently, I have a paper under review at one of the journals which essentially captures what I'll be talking about today. And hopefully with your prayers, if the paper gets published, I'll be happy to share a copy with your department head or whoever, so you all can review and give me some feedback. As I mentioned to you, I had the pleasure of reaching out to organizations across the spectrum, both developers of technology, users of technology, healthcare, and other fields, to get a wide perspective on this phenomenon. And I spoke with the Chief Information Security Officer, the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Technology Officer, and I gave them a set of questions, open-ended questions that they had to respond. Fortunately, because of the relationship that I enjoy they took the trouble of personally responding to those questions. And the reason I feel the need to mention that is because that tells you the quality of my data is very, very good. I don't need to get thousands and thousands of data points. I need some data points, but there must be quality data points. And so what I share with you are real quality insights. And as you know, research is a dialogue. It evolves through interaction, through feedback. So when I had my first set of findings, that's when I went to Salesforce, because I'm a huge believer of constantly connecting with practice. I do not like doing what I call ivory tower research, which is just mindlessly mining data, cranking out another paper and publishing. I don't like to do that kind of work. I like to engage with practice, understand real problems, and come up with real solutions. Then I like to go back to them to present my findings and defend my findings. When practice says, yes, Dave, this was good work, I feel validated because they have to do it for a living. Their jobs are on the line. So that's why it is very important to me that practitioners value what I do, and that's why I make it a point to go to companies. Then of course I went to a conference, then went to a university, went to another conference, back to an organization, back to a conference, back to another. This is a group of CIOs, and then on the 19th I was at IIM Calcutta. So I enjoy the opportunity of talking to people from different spheres who shed light on this phenomenon in many different ways. And I'm delighted to be here this morning to also learn from you. This is a collective learning exercise because hopefully you will agree that no one individual knows everything about this subject. Is that correct? Don't you agree? And cybersecurity, as some of you might think, is a technical problem. Wrong. Cybersecurity is a business problem. Wrong. Cybersecurity is a business and technical problem. Correct. You have to understand, as your father said, holistically. You have to understand the problem in a very holistic way. If organizations don't get that, that's where the awareness has to happen. They cannot just pass on the ownership, the responsibility to IT and kind of wipe their hands off the problem. They cannot do that. You have to own the problem. So, where did the word high reliability organization come? Here's an interesting story, and you might like this story. So, the US Navy, they have nuclear submarines, and in the early years, the submarines were powered by diesel. But diesel can take you for so long, only so long, so they had to come up again to get refueled and then again go down. And every time a submarine comes up, you've kind of lost valuable predictability issues, because then folks know where your submarine is located. And that's not what the submariners want. They want to stay submerged as long as they can so people can trace them. So they launched an exercise to find out an alternative to diesel, and they came up with nuclear power as a source for fueling these submarines. So in the early 60s, I believe, they started the nuclear propulsion program, as a result of which they started powering their aircraft carriers, their submarines, their cruisers with nuclear power. And Admiral Hyman Rickover was the father of the US nuclear navy. He was the one who convinced Congress that I want to use the nuclear power to establish these nuclear reactors to power our submarines, and I promise you, I will take every precaution so that we manage it well, because one mistake, what can happen? Death. That's it. There is no chances of survival. And then, as I was doing research about this program, I learned that they have a blemishless track record of 0 incidents since the time the program was in place, which is quite a track record. It's almost like a zero defect environment over the last 60 years. So how did they achieve that kind of success? And maybe before I go there, let me also share with you a little more insight of life inside aboard a US submarine. Interestingly enough, I have several of my former executive MBA students who served as a crew member in nuclear submarines. So I was able to get hold of one of them to shed more light of life within a submarine. And there's a reason why I'm highlighting these. For instance, take the case of a particular submarine that has 135 sailors but only 94 beds, which means you're not guaranteed a bed. That doesn't mean you have to compete for a bed. What it means is you're assigned X number of hours, which is 5, I believe. You sleep for 5, then the next person comes and wakes you up, then it's his turn, you go take a shower and go to work. And you work in 8-hour shifts. There is no such thing as night and day. Very focused environment and pretty tough environment. And this guy, the guy who's been credited with this program at Colonel Rickover, he developed a culture which he called the high reliability culture based on 6 principles: integrity, depth of knowledge, procedural compliance, forceful backup, questioning attitude, and formality in communications. And he attributes each of these principles to that blemishless track record. The fact that they have been able to operate so successfully over such a long period of time is because they have done a great job of implementing and sustaining this culture. What do we mean by integrity? No deliberate departures from protocols, no shortcuts, immediately owning up to mistakes, immediately reporting every anomaly that arises. Now, as I go through these principles, I hope you are thinking in the back of your mind, your organization, your unit, and to what extent are you complying with these principles? Are you following, or are there any areas for improvement? But I can't tell you how important a high level of commitment and discipline is to support an effective cybersecurity governance program. Very important. Depth of knowledge. You have to make people aware, because as you know, every person is a potential point of vulnerability. So if people don't understand the cybersecurity implications, if people don't understand what causes different types of attacks and how they can prevent attacks, they could be that point of compromise. Going back to the submarine, such was their training that they had to, for their exams, they were required to draw each and every system inside out and showcase how the systems connected with each other. If they couldn't, they had to retrain or they were fired. And every nuclear reactor and their systems had a procedures manual that had to be followed meticulously. And there were people watching over. So if you didn't follow protocol, if you took shortcuts, you're fired. So a rigorous focus on compliance. Think about it. In the arena of cybersecurity, based on the company that I interact with, they can have a lot of procedures, they can have a lot of documentation, but compliance is not always great, because it's a matter of discipline. That's what I was talking about. Strict adherence to procedures, extensive system of inspections and surprise inspections, written tests, day-to-day observations of operations. So, on the submarine, they take enormous effort to ensure nobody makes a mistake, because one mistake, everyone dies. Is that the case in the university? If there is a cyber attack, will everyone die? unlikely. Is that a case with their company? Even a company like Equifax, which has everyone's personal data in the US, and they were compromised big time, they kind of went away. You know, some of the senior executives were fired, but they got massive bonuses, and each one of them is a millionaire. So I can imagine why they could care less. And if they care less, if the CEOs care less, cybersecurity is not happening in your organization. I don't care how strong, how effective your IT unit is. If the top management doesn't really buy into the importance of cybersecurity management and doesn't push down hard, doesn't get actively involved, you are not going to see results. Forceful backup. Do you all understand internal controls? In the nuclear navy, they have a rule. Anytime they identify a task as high risk, there has to be at least 2 people, not just one. So there has to be a constant check. At least 2 people. Every crew member is empowered to put a stop to a problem if they see it. Interesting. In a very hierarchical structure where you just do what you're ordered to do, when it comes to the nuclear navy, if they see something that is being done which is not correct, they can go above their supervisor and report the problem. But to be able to do that, they really need to have an in-depth understanding of the systems. And that's why the rigorous training. And you might be surprised that most of these crew members are 19 years old, really, really young, but exceptionally smart. So their recruitment process is very rigorous, very rigorous. And they go through a tremendous amount of training. And all this I learned from this person who has gone through. And it was really an eye-opener. They are encouraged to ask questions. If they see a problem, they're like, why is this happening this way? I've learned that it should operate this way. And something doesn't seem to be right, I'm going to report the matter. They're encouraged to do that. It's a requirement that when a supervisor asks the subordinate to do something, it's an order, the subordinate has to repeat verbatim exactly what the order is, and then go ahead and execute it. Almost seems like a robotic approach, isn't it? But why that approach? Because they cannot afford to make a mistake. And that's the part that really gets my attention and my admiration. Such adherence to protocol, such focus on discipline, such focus on rigor, and not taking any chances whatsoever. And I understand the context, again, is a nuclear submarine. One mistake, we are all dead. It's very hard to replicate that in any regular organization. Very hard. Very hard to replicate the culture, but even if you can achieve 60%, you will see tremendous success. So I took these principles and I mapped them into success factors. And then I analyzed the data and I found support for each of the six success factors. For those of you who do qualitative analysis, I used a tool called NVO, which allows me to code the data and do different types of qualitative analysis to find validation for each of the factors. So I found validation for each of the 6 factors, and then for each factor, I was able to again locate or identify sub-factors. And that led to success factors. 12 success factors. In other words, what I am saying today to you is to improve the level of reliability from a cybersecurity standpoint. A company or an organization has to score highly on each of these factors. And that's the next project, is to create a performance scorecard, an HRO performance scorecard, and allow companies to self-assess themselves and identify areas for improvement. So now let's look at each of the success factors. Let's take hands-on top management. As I mentioned earlier, this is a rarity. Almost never do top management get their feet wet or their hands wet when it comes to cybersecurity. They want to just palm it off, hand it off to somebody else. They are too big for that kind of an issue, supposedly. When I have spoken to my friends at the C-level, they will tell me, and I've told them that, I feel investing in cybersecurity should be treated as a strategic investment. The response has been, oh, you can't call it strategic. Because when you say strategic, you're thinking about increasing revenue, increasing market share, increasing our product line. My response, I agree, but guess what? You don't give enough importance to this issue, you're going to go under, you're going to go bankrupt, you're going to get sued, and good luck with growing market share. So you have to consider investing in cybersecurity as a strategic investment and give it priority. The good news is I've been talking about this for the last 5-6 years. Today, when I look at the survey data, I see some improvement. Senior executives are a lot more sensitive to this matter than they have ever been. My recommendation, the leadership should personally know about the organization's vulnerability points and defense mechanisms. They should participate in security review discussions. They should proactively engage with and involve the CISO in every business initiative. And that brings us another point. As I mentioned earlier, information security is just not a technology issue. It is just not a problem of the IT department. It's an organizational problem. IT exists not for the sake of IT. IT exists for the sake of the organization, right? So how can you treat information security as a stepchild or something that you really don't want to deal with but you don't have a choice? Okay, you got to deal with it. You have to embrace it. It is centric to your survival and success as a company. It is a matter of time before you will start reading articles in the journal. They'll say that the ability to effectively manage cybersecurity has become a strategic competence. Just a matter of time. But it's coming. The leadership needs to actively invest, actively engage, because that's how they set the tone, which will be followed by the rest of the organization. Along similar lines, or if you drill down further, what do I mean by getting engaged? The whole gamut, from planning, education and training, hiring of talent, every aspect of cybersecurity governance must have top management involved. Something as simple as survey of these committees. Something as simple as wanting to know exactly what went wrong, why it went wrong, what can we do differently. Get your head in. You cannot look the other way. Security is everyone's concern, especially in today's day and age in a highly global environment where companies are globally organized. Employees are traveling around the world with their cell phones, mobile devices. Some of them are carrying sensitive data with them, some of them are accessing sensitive data. You are not going to be able to secure those organizations by establishing firewalls and the traditional way we did things in the early days. You're not going to do that. You're not going to accomplish that. You have to find a way of training people to use their devices, to use their data responsibly so you can secure the organization. So you have to engage every employee of the organization. They have to be part of your team to fight this battle against cybersecurity. No doubt, you have to have a specialized team, such as an IT security team, but there has to be ancillary teams supporting them. You can have, just like as you know, you can have a centralized support, but then you must have embedded support. The other day I was talking to an executive of NCR, and while discussing this, he said, Dave, do you know something? I said, what? He said, we are a 40,000 employee global company. Do you know how many people was on our security team till recently? I said, how many? He said, 2. I said, you just 2? He said, yeah. He said, now we have gone up to 6. I'm like, how do you guys manage 40,000 people globally located? He says, beats me, I don't know. I figured as I spoke with him a little longer that though companies don't like to admit it, they are waiting for a disaster to happen. Till then, they would like to close their eyes and keep doing what Wall Street wants them to do is to make money. And they feel, if it happens, we'll deal with it, but till then, let's not worry about it. Will they share with the shareholders? Never. Let me share with you another interesting story. So I was talking to senior IT leaders of local and state government. And you know, when you're working in a local government, who are the top management? Elected officials. So here I'm giving a talk coming at it from a Fortune 500 company, and they're smiling, and then somebody raises his hand and says, oh, Chatterjee, it's all good, you're Fortune 500, C-level people, but do you know who our top management is? These are a bunch of elected people. Most of them have no knowledge, no clue of IT, leave alone IT security. All that they care for is to get elected again. So they want us to only do whatever it takes for them to get elected, and they do not connect cybersecurity with that stuff. So they're like, what's the point of listening to all this stuff? We will never convince them to support us. We have no security budget, minimum. So then I had some advice for them. I said, you know what I say is do something. Go to them and say, let's try to identify some scenarios. That let's say the public data is compromised because of a certain problem, and now the people are mad, and now you're having to tell the press why it happened and what are the consequences. What explanation will you give to the media or give to other legislators in your defense, saying that despite all that we did, this happened? Such as the contamination of the water supply. If the local government does not do their part, if the infrastructure is compromised, people could die of water poisoning. Imagine a scenario like this and then write down a briefing that, okay, if that happens, if people are dying of water poisoning, this is what we will tell the public. I said, do that exercise with these elected officials. Highlight what are the possible consequences, and then tell them, this is how we will explain our lack of attention or our reactive approach to these issues. If you engage in this exercise, you will see the level of awareness is going to rise. They will recognize, oh, I see, I didn't realize that. Really? If that's possible? No, that is possible. It is possible that you might wake up in the morning and you find that you have no access to your bank anymore. You've lost funds. Some of you are familiar with the Enron fiasco, right? Which happened many years ago. People lost their retirement money completely. Now that wasn't a cybersecurity problem. It was a different problem. It's a fraud happened. And it took legislation to stop that. I'm afraid we are going in that direction with cybersecurity. The best motivator, unfortunately, often is fear. And senior executives understand fear. The fear of going to jail. So only when legislation is passed will there be some change. Until then, it could very well become an academic exercise of discussions, papers, where when it comes to action, comes to proactive action, there could be a huge, huge lack of performance. another important point, which was again an eye-opener. This again happened at Salesforce. They told me that, do you realize that our software development team and our IT security team don't talk to each other? They don't even understand the scope of their respective work. They're almost in conflict with each other. The developers are in a rush to develop and get the software out because that's how they are being evaluated. Whereas the security people are playing the inspector's role, saying, hey, don't rush it, we have some problems there, let's go back to the drawing board, review the code, change up stuff before you send it out. So they don't like those kinds of security people because it slows them down. It is unfortunate that that's the kind of relationship that exists, because in reality they should be working as a team. And you think that that's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't the security people work as a team with the developers to create great solutions? Why wouldn't they? I hope you recognize one of the challenges we've had in the field of technology in business is forever there has been a divide between the business people and the IT people. They've always been treated as two separate worlds who can never come together. Though there has constantly been recommendations of business and IT working in tandem as partners. I have actually seen that phenomenon evolve. I've worked in that space for years. I see some progress, but still there's a huge disconnect. People still look at IT and say, oh, you guys, the troubleshooters, we'll only come to you when we have a technical problem. Oh, my mobile device is not working, can you help fix it? They only see IT as solving technical problems. They don't see IT having the ability of helping the business grow. In other words, the strategic capabilities of technology. Now, that's not the case if you are at UPS. That's not the case if you are at FedEx. Their technology people are enabling the growth of the company. But then there are many companies which still have this very narrow, siloed, back office view of IT operations. Until that mindset changes, we will have these problems. So let me emphasize again, it is not technology per se that's going to solve this problem. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. People, process, technology. Three things have to come together with great governance mechanism if we have to address this issue. That's why some companies do better than others. It's like two companies buying same technology, one company doing a far better job of creating value than the others. What's the difference? One company is way better prepared than others. This is another, I mentioned this earlier, is having the right amount of money. There's no such thing as right amount of money. And it is also foolhardy to say, oh, I spent above the industry average, so see, we are very committed to security. It's not about spending an extra amount of money, it's about where you're spending, how you're spending, why you're spending. Have you done the analysis to identify the areas? Are you investing in technology that is dated but still exists in companies because these are large companies and they don't have the time to weed out those technologies? So what kinds of effort has been made to carefully identify the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities, and then make very judicious calls of what to spend and where? Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Even in the best of companies, they're too caught up in their day-to-day operations. You go and talk cybersecurity to somebody who's managing a multi-million-dollar budget, you know what he's going to tell you? I don't have time for that stuff. I have to deliver. I'm in charge of multi-million-dollar of production by such and certain date. Cybersecurity has to be done by somebody else. Right there we have a problem. Cybersecurity has to be built in to the fabric of day-to-day governance. That has to be inextricably linked. You shouldn't feel it. Once again, I would refer to Reverend Father, who mentioned that. Keep it simple. Don't make it a big deal. You got to do this, you got to do that. That's the beauty about great governance. You won't even know it, but it's happening. But for that to happen, you need some very sophisticated thinkers. Not a bunch of people coming there and saying, okay, we need to install hardware here, install hardware there, change up this. No, it's way more than that. It is that, plus a lot more. A lot more. Just like we talk about layers of security, network layer, application layer, similarly, we also have to think in terms of administrative controls and other forms of controls. The approach has to be very multi-pronged, very holistic. You can't say, oh, this year we have the money, we'll give you some extra money, go and do cybersecurity. Oh, this year is tough, sorry, no money for cybersecurity. You can't do that. That's why you have to give cybersecurity that strategic importance that nobody messes with cybersecurity funds. It's part of running the business. You know, it reminds me, many, many years ago, there was a contentious debate going on that information technology is a commodity. Because you can just go and buy the software. So let's not make a big deal about how IT is important for strategic value creation, how IT can be a source of competitive advantage. There's a lot of back and forth going on. So one particular scholar made a very interesting point. He says, okay, understood, IT is not that important, it doesn't really matter. Okay, the title of the article which provoked this discussion, you can Google it later on. The title of the article was IT Doesn't Matter. That was the title of the article, IT Doesn't Matter. So in response to the article, this particular scholar said, okay, IT doesn't matter, let's create a scenario where you guys do not use IT at all. Let's shut down the data centers and go and work. Make it happen. How long do you think an organization can operate if the data centers are shut down? Do you know? What's the average time span of survival for an organization? Approximately 2 days. That's probably the max. And that too from a retail outlet. Leave alone airlines and all the critical infrastructure. So that's how important technology is to our day-to-day lives. That's how electronically enabled we are becoming. Yet, we will say, oh, cybersecurity is just somebody else will do. No, you can't. You have to own it. Now, you don't have to be an expert, but you have to know enough to make good calls. So we need very mature governance procedures. Now, there is no shortage of guidance, by the way. Even this morning on LinkedIn, I was reading that NIST has come out with some more guidance, some more recommendations. So there is no shortage of guidance. There is a lot of recommendations about using sound policy, adopting a long-term approach, being consistent with your policies, having formal teams in place, having formal procedures in place. But the unfortunate reality is companies are too lazy to follow through. It's too much work. I've heard this from the horse's mouth. Oh, that's a 200-page document. We can't worry about all that. We don't have time for that. We're doing something here. It's okay. It works. Oh, if it fails, it fails. Well, that's the best we can do. So, again, it's not a very deliberate, not a very thoughtful, not a very strategic approach to managing the problem. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Related to what I was saying, and I mentioned this many times, that you have to give cybersecurity strategic importance. What that means is you have to connect it to the overall strategic goals of this organization. Such as, what's the overall strategic goal of this college, let's say? To produce great products, who will go and do great things, and so on and so forth. How do you connect cybersecurity governance to that? That's the link you have to, an organization has to establish to justify the importance. And every organization has to find their own path, find their own justification, and once they find it, they have to go ahead and let everyone know that you all have a bone in the game, so you better act up and make cybersecurity performance part of their evaluation. There has to be an incentive system in place. If something goes wrong, you will be also held accountable over and above your operational operational targets. Training, as hopefully you remember from my example with the nuclear naval program, has to be not only rigorous, but it has to be frequent. It reminds me of ERP training, where I hear companies signing this multi-million-dollar ERP contract with like a 6-month training program built into it. And I'm like, really? You bought into this contract? Just 6 months training for learning a software as complicated as ERP? I remember once I attended an ERP training program for faculty, and we spent 5 days, 8 hours a day, 40 hours, just to learn how to navigate through the different modules. Leave alone customizing it and so on and so forth. These are complex pieces of software. You need reinforcement, you need repeated training. More so for the people who are not aware than the people who are aware. So you cannot take a one-shot, low-budget, low-quality approach. It has to be a sustained approach, very sustained approach. There has to be constant monitoring, you have to have measures in place. What are the metrics to assess how you're doing from the standpoint of cybersecurity? And you know why metrics are important? Because you also should recognize the people who are doing a good job. Unfortunately, if a whole year goes by and there are no problems, have you ever heard an organization recognizing and saying, this year there were no breaches, so we are going to give X amount of money to the cybersecurity team for doing a fantastic job? Have you ever heard that? On the reverse, if there is a breach and if there is problem, fire immediately. That's the problem. If you have the right to fire, also reward them. It has to be both ways. It has to go both ways. So, unfortunately, I am saddened by the short term. The thinking is not rich enough, not deep enough. I don't question the smarts. I just question the very short term mindset. They intentionally, I think, don't want to see the big picture. And that is unfortunate. There are a lot of metrics, and we can talk for hours. But more important, or equally important, is identifying the right metrics, capturing good quality data, and then acting on the findings. I have seen companies collect a lot of data but do nothing with it. Pointless. Then why even bother? Same applies in the context of cybersecurity. This is probably the most important. Who is accountable? If something were to go wrong, if there was a breach, is there one person responsible? Is there a team? Or more than that? Well, that's where a lot of thinking has to go. If you are going to make this one person responsible, better give him or her a lot of power, a lot of support. You can't have a sitting duck, which is what many companies do. They have a security problem, and the senior executives say, well, you know what? We are going to be breached any day. Well, let's find that lame duck, let's hire him or her, appoint him as a CIO. So if something goes wrong, that person goes. It has happened. This guy was hired. Within 3 months, they had a major attack, compromised, sued by customers. They fired that guy. And Wall Street immediately said, wonderful. That's how symbolic we have become in our approach. Because most of the people don't understand, have no clue. They're like, as long as you fired somebody, we know you're doing something right. Well, they're just playing with you, they're acting. And you're falling for it. It reminds me of politics, that we're all a bunch of fools. You just have to get deeper than that. You have to get deeper than that. So who is accountable? As I said earlier, is cybersecurity an IT matter or a business matter? Should business partner with IT to share responsibility and accountability? The answer is, the first is, IT is a business matter. The answer to the second is, there has to be a strong partnership if we want to see progress. I'm impressed that many of you in this audience are not just from IT, correct? From different fields, right? That is so important. Even in academia, unfortunately, we are very siloed. We are not encouraged to collaborate and practice in different journals. We are told you have to publish in your own journal. Once again, very, very unfortunate approach. Intellectual thinking, intellectual value creation must be multidimensional, must be eclectic. Though we emphasize specialization and there is some value in it, please recognize, and I'm sure you recognize, we are so connected in so many different ways. One of your colleagues just told me that there was a student who was a math student, writes incredible code. And that's my point. I know a music major who writes terrific code. So what has music got to do with technology? A lot. We don't see it. Because we are not encouraged to see it. We've got to see the connections. That's what makes us intellectually powerful. Security audits. I have been an auditor during my early career. I understand audit. The traditional year-end audits are not very helpful. They're more like historic. What happened? If you want audits to be helpful, they have to be real time. You have to use audit to preempt problems, not understand and explain why it happened. Well, that's good, you explained to me, but I wish you could have stopped it from happening in the first place. So be proactive about these things. And just like in many countries, such as the US, I'm not sure what happens here in India, we have fire drills constantly. But there are no security drills. And I've often asked, even my own university, that have you all thought of doing security drills, like IT security drills? Assume that you have been attacked, your systems have gone down. How quickly do you come up from a backup system, backup site, from a mirror site? What problems do you run into? What kind of disaster recovery plan do you have in place? Have you tested your disaster recovery plan? No point having a plan in the books. When I was an auditor, I would go and they would show me the best of books to impress me. Then when I would take a few samples and say, okay, now show me, let me see the reality of it, nothing is going on. Books are great. What's the point? Who are we trying to fool? So organizations must conduct information security drills. Organizations must simulate cyber attacks. And I'm not saying if you did this, you would have solved the problem, but if you did this, you convey that you're being proactive, you are being diligent, and if you are sued or if your company is accused of not being sensitive to customers, you have something to say, something to defend, as opposed to, oh, we missed that. And guess what? Why is this problem even more complicated? Because it's not enough just to secure your own employees by training them. You now also have to secure the third-party service providers. Many of the attacks have happened thanks to vulnerabilities in the third-party environment. That makes the problem even worse. Once again, we are electronically enabled, so we are doing business electronically, which is great. But now, even those third-party service providers need to comply with security guidelines and protocols. So the perimeter that we have to cover, we have to secure, gets wider and wider. Just like I shared with you the 12 success factors, you will not be surprised by my findings about the hurdles, because they kind of relate to the success factors. So I have identified 10 hurdles, I believe. One of it is lack of governance and process maturity. Whenever you see a cybersecurity breach or cybersecurity attack, if you go in and if you do in-depth analysis, generally you'll find them operating at, let's say, at a 2 on a scale of 1 to 5 from the standpoint of process maturity. You often might find that in these organizations, shadow IT organizations exist. And you know what shadow IT organizations are. Units will set up their own little IT unit because they don't want to reach out to central IT because it takes a long time and other problems. But by creating those shadow IT units, they create more problems. They create more challenges. budgets are a problem. Justifying why you want to spend an ROI, spend on cybersecurity has been articulated as a problem. If you see these in quotes, because they are coming straight from the experts in my interviews. These are not my words, these are the words of the expert. Like this expert says, there is only so much you get funding for based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So exactly. You have to recognize that this is a real issue, part of overall governance, and let's approach it properly as opposed to like a short-term, ad hoc, jerky reaction. We can't do that. Human factor, as I said earlier. How prepared are the users? What is their mindset? Do they have a security mindset in place? And if a company is experiencing high turnover, that's a pain because you have to train more people. In this context, let me share with you an interesting research finding. Research finds that if an organization can create a culture where people are happy and loyal, they can save themselves from many, many possible attacks. Because often these attacks are launched by insiders, disgruntled insiders. So there is some merit to the recommendation that try to create a happy culture. So when you hear about a recommendation like that in a cybersecurity context, you are thinking, well, they never talked about a specific technology, they never talked about a specific architecture. What are they saying? Create a happy organizational culture? But actually, that's a very important point. Hard to do. But it is a success factor. Regulatory compliance. Lots of regulations out there. Companies are scratching their head over what to comply, how to comply, because if they don't comply, they go to jail. So it's very important. And now comes cybersecurity, one more thing on their plate, complicates matters further. So it's not easy. Are we good with time? Are we running out of time? Are we okay? Just want to make sure. Yeah, absolutely. Shall we stop here then? Yeah, we can stop here. Okay, why don't we take a little break and then we'll wrap up the rest.
This is a small tea break of 5 minutes and then we'll come back in first. Okay, welcome back. Let us now continue with the session.
So we stopped at the discussion of some of the hurdles, and we stopped at the size and complexity factor. If you think about it, the larger the organization, the more the product offerings, the greater number of changes that have to be made on a regular basis. Cybersecurity governance becomes a challenge. So it's not an easy proposition. It varies from company to company, from industry to industry. Another interesting hurdle is this whole convenience thing. I think I mentioned this to you earlier in a different context. People love convenience, whether it's the customers, whether it's the suppliers. So if you're trying to secure the organization and create more levels of authentication, you can turn off some of these people. Even the employees can get turned off that I'm having to remember so many passwords, I can't get access to this, get access to that. So there's a price to be paid to secure yourself. So what's that threshold? What's that point? What's that break-even point, so to speak? Those are the kinds of calls companies have to make. In some industries, such as financial services, highly protected, highly regulated, healthcare, it's a no-brainer. You don't take any chances. In fact, companies don't get to choose. You have to follow the regulatory mandates. In other companies, in other industries, companies have to make good, judicious calls. Here's an example from the Chief Information Officer of a large university, Chief Information Security Officer of a large university, who talked about how they struggle with this whole security versus convenience factor. Some industries are bigger targets than others, like healthcare records, as you probably know, are more valuable in the black market than even credit cards or financial data. So, in those industries, cybersecurity governance is critical, but also challenging. We talked about this before. I emphasized how important top management commitment is. The literature, as well as the executives who were interviewed, the experts, they validate that concern. That senior management time and attention is a single biggest driver of maturity in managing cyber security risks. Awareness. It all starts with awareness. Unless you are aware, how can you make good decisions? How can you come up with a good plan? And there's a saying, ignorance is bliss. So you feel you know it. Oh, I understand. I know what security is. I know what to do. Well, get deeper. And you'll see so much more there is to learn. So it's not as simple as it sounds. There is too much to it, and there are too many dimensions to cybersecurity. And you have to adopt a partnership approach, especially in today's business environment where organizations work as teams. Can you think of any company, any organization that operates by itself? Almost none. There is some kind of a partnership involved. While partnerships are good, they also create the challenge of making sure the partner recognizes, respects, and follows the necessary protocols so you can offer a secure offering, a secure platform to your customers. So to close my discussion today, I'd like to leave you with this graphic. First, I want to say that when you talk about information security, you're talking about securing the data, securing the network, securing the devices, securing the location, and securing the people. And as I said earlier, securing people is about training them, creating awareness, making them conscious. You don't secure them by literally securing them, not by, locks or anything like that, but make them more conscious. To achieve security in all these dimensions, at all these levels, you need some anchors. And these anchors or pillars are commitment, preparedness, and discipline. So those 12 factors that I talked about, I have mapped them under these 3 anchors. So at a high level, ask yourself, how committed are we as an organization to secure sensitive data? Ask yourself, how prepared are we as an organization to secure sensitive data? Ask yourself, how disciplined are we as an organization to secure sensitive data? Give your organization a rating on a scale of 0 to 5. That's how you have to get to the root of the problem. Analyze the issues. And for each of these high-level factors, here are the sub-factors. What it takes to achieve this, what it takes to achieve this, what it takes to achieve this. And again, recognize these are not mutually exclusive. They're all connected in different ways. You could change them up a little bit. Some of these could also feature here. Those are all possibilities. That's why research is a dialogue. Research is a process. There is no one version of the truth, as they say. Because truth is not easy. It's complicated. It comes out in different forms, in different circumstances, scenarios. It constantly challenges us because it's an evolving problem. Hackers are not sitting, waiting for the others to catch up. They're already out there. So how do you constantly keep up with them? Where that is not what you do for a living. You are trying to offer education. Some companies creating a product, so you'll have different agenda. Yet you can't ignore security. It's literally the price of running an enterprise. It's the price of doing business. So you better get good at it. Otherwise, you will suffer consequences. With that, I conclude my presentation. I appreciate your time listening, and I look forward to questions.
I have a few simple questions, maybe not relevant for your topic.
Okay.
My first question is, as a computer scientist,
Yeah.
actually this will be my relevant question at this stage. If you can discuss something of the standard cyber attacks, and how do we get rid of that? I mean, how do we protect from the cyber attacks?
So when you say standard cyber attacks, let's take the example of a denial of service attack or a distributed denial of service attack, DNS attack. Now, if you think about the way that attack is triggered, which is remotely, from very remote locations, hard to kind of pinpoint the source because it's camouflaged, because they're using different nodes to direct the attacks. The different things that you can do at one level, of course, is to have excellent firewall protection. I recommend having proxy firewalls in place, which will protect the real servers, and it'll probably go down, fending off the attack without disclosing the identity of the servers behind the wall. I also recommend constant network monitoring, assessing what kind of traffic you are getting, making sure that you're investing in good quality firewalls, so you have the option of configuring them to filter out traffic. I also believe in intrusion detection testing on a constant basis to see how robust your current defense mechanisms are, what changes can you make or should you be making on a regular basis. So it's a constant process, and I've always recommended that it helps for companies to hire external service providers that are often run by sophisticated hackers who are up with the latest types of attacks, who can, give you real-time insight of what to do, what your current vulnerabilities are, and so on and so forth. So that's one example. Another example is an interesting example. I wish I was scanning that particular set of slides where this particular hacker has a friend CEO, and he told the CEO, hey, will you give me a contract so I can take care of your cybersecurity issues, so I can test your cybersecurity on a regular basis? And he said, well, you know what, we are fine. We don't need any specialized help. We are doing quite fine. So then he tells his friend, okay, how about this?
let me see how vulnerable you are. If I, within 24 hours, can produce to you sensitive documents, will you then give me the contract? He said, okay, done deal, challenge. So he shows up next day dressed as an AT&T worker, like basically a telecommunications worker. And he goes to the reception, and the reception is a nice lady, elderly lady, well-meaning, and he tells her that I just got a call, there are some problems with the network, I need to go and check it, can you please let me in to the server room? And she didn't think much about it, so absolutely, because he was all dressed up, wearing his bag and everything, she let him in. He goes in, he does whatever he has to do, he comes out, and then he says, you know what, I realize I need to access a certain system, can I please have that password that you all used to get in? And she said, oh, here it is. So in a very unsuspecting way, she was providing him all the information he was wanting, thinking that she was being helpful, that she was helping the company. So he goes in, he accesses stuff, he gets printouts, shows up at his friend's office, and he said, okay, here you go. I got all this payroll data, I got this data, that data. And he said, how do you do it? He said, nothing. The lady there who sits at the front, she means well, but she gave me all this information. How do you prevent that? Well, you have to make them very, very conscious, very, very aware. To the extent, remember, when you get in the door of these companies, there are locks, and you're not supposed to let the next person in. You get in, and the other person then also has to swipe the card and get in, right? But if you are a friend of mine, and you're following me in, I would just assume it's okay, you know, I know you. But you can't make those assumptions. You know once what happened at Cisco? Cisco fired this particular person. And the guy was mad. So they show on their closed circuit TV that he's been fired, he's left. But they show you the door actually in the US. When they fire you, they don't leave anything to doubt. Security will come and escort you out of your office, out the door. So they showed him the door, he goes out, and then he waits to see a friend, because everyone doesn't know that he's been fired yet. See the friend, so he comes right back in. And then he steals 4 or 5 laptops. And the closed circuit TV sees him carrying out these 5 or 6 laptops outside the company premises. And that became a training tool for Cisco for a long period of time. Basically, the message being, as soon as we fire a person, we immediately have to take away his or her access immediately. It cannot wait 6 hours, 7 hours, it must be immediate. So that's an example of administrative protocols. As a security auditor, I want to see who has access to what kinds of systems, at what level, in terms of documentation, and then I want to go and test it out. I have known of instances where the roles have evolved, but the access hasn't changed. In fact, the access has increased because the previous access has not gone away. The person has now extra access. So all these kinds of things keep happening, and you know there are all kinds of challenges that you deal with. So those are some examples that I can think of. Sure.
Just one question.
Yes.
In the presentation you have shown,
Yes.
you have deduced a set of factors and sub-factors.
Yeah.
So you have used some mathematical model for that purpose, some models?
Okay, good question. So at this stage, the approach was to identify the factors. What you are referring to will be the next phase where I start creating that relationship of independent variables and dependent variables and intervening variables, right? So you can consider those 12 factors as potential independent and intervening variables. The dependent variable right now as we speak is the level of high reliability, the level and extent of high reliability. So now, of course, these are the constructs, so I have to define them, operationalize them, and then run the survey. But at the moment, the focus has been to get to the depth of these issues. Because as you know, I have done a lot of surveys in my life. Surveys show relationships, show associations, but they don't always richly identify why. And I am more interested in the why. I am not that interested in significance because I'm at a stage in my career where publishing is not that important to me. What is important is I want to have findings that will change practice so they can really make some proper improvement. So while I want to talk to my peers who like to see methodology, significance, which is important, no doubt, today I am more interested in talking to practice and showcasing them where they are going wrong. I'm still using very robust approach, but more geared towards, like, to give you an example, if I do a survey, I am likely to find top management commitment having a significant impact on the extent of reliability. I mean, I can tell you without conducting the survey, I'm going to find a significance. But that finding is meaningless. If I tell you, your top management needs to be more involved, okay? That's like saying you need to breathe to exist. What is more important is how do you get top management more engaged in your organization? What do you have to do? How do you get them, how do you get their attention? Do you have to go and tell them, do you realize we are sitting on a time bomb? If we don't do these things tomorrow, we could be breached, we could be out of business, we have no jobs. Now you have my attention. Oh my goodness, is that true? Now I'm going to act. But till then, I'm like, okay, I understand, it's all good, keep talking, but we are still going to pursue standard protocol.
That means there is a very close relationship between whatever we are getting from the survey, the mathematical regression, whatever we are getting. There is a close relationship between that and what the actual practice should be.
You're right. There should be. It is what I have seen when I review papers. What I often find that researchers do a great job of analysis, quantitative analysis. They find significance, 0.001, they get excited, published, But when it comes to interpreting the findings, the interpretation often doesn't have enough substance. Partly because the researcher is very good at analyzing data, but doesn't really understand the domain. So that's where a little bit of teamwork is important. So what I did actually for my paper that is under review, I teamed up with my former student who's a nuclear naval submariner. He has no understanding of cybersecurity, period. He's an accountant. But he has the experience of that culture. So I teamed up with him because I wanted him to provide me with insights about what it takes for that organization to succeed, because that's a very valuable insight that I wouldn't get otherwise. And surveys, you have to keep the questions short. You can only ask so many questions. You better have all the appropriate options, because otherwise you may not get a good response. As opposed to open-ended questions where people can really come out with some interesting insights, which otherwise you may not be able to tap into. So there's some challenges with surveys. I do surveys, but I do it at the very end when I have a really, really rich understanding of the phenomenon. And I believe I am almost there. But so that will be the next step, where we will do the mathematical modeling and the analysis and generalize our findings more. Yes?
Well, as a role of a security auditor, you have mentioned the role of the top management, involvement of the top management. What do you think should be the involvement of the government regarding curbing the security attacks? How should be the role of the government?
Like I told you, I think government has to, unfortunately, impose legislation where if, let's say, a company has breached, systems have been breached, and customer data has been exposed, they have to pay a huge penalty. And I'm a big fan of going to jail, by the way. I mean, I don't want to go to jail, but it's funny, you're smiling, but when I teach my undergraduate class, I ask my students, I said, so you're paying a lot of money to be in school, business school, 4 years. So what are your expectations when you graduate? They'll say, oh, I want to make so much money, I want to be the CEO. So they say a lot of different things. So I say, you know what, I would suggest should be your kind of metric. Well, if you can have a good career without going to jail, we have done you well as professors. So I use going to jail as a sounding board because that sends home the message that you really have to get serious about it, otherwise we will penalize you heavily, and you can't just run away and say, oh, I no longer work. And you know, firing these guys doesn't help because when they're fired, they get a compensation for getting fired. And so they still make money for their lack of effort. So government has to step in. You cannot operate without government intervention because history tells us companies proactively will not do things in the interest of customer. They say that customer is number one, customer is priority. Unfortunately, my finding is customer is not their priority. So government intervention is necessary.
So you still think that the government is lacking?
Oh yes, very much so. Lacking, and you know, again, government is a good example of behind the curve. They're forever behind the curve. I still remember some of the technology policies in the US were so far behind that they were ridiculous. When you would read the policies and like, these don't even make sense in today's day and age. And that's because people who are holding offices and voting, their level of awareness is kind of not there. Now, you don't expect everyone to be a cybersecurity expert, but you expect them to have support teams, to help them, to inform them so they can take regular or the proper action, but very lacking. Lots of planning sessions are going on, lots of commissions are being held, lots of governance, lots of frameworks are coming out, NIST frameworks. But that's not the solution. Unfortunately, the solution is the carrot and the stick approach. You do well, like for instance, you're aware of rankings of companies. What are the rankings based on? How much money they make. Recently, they are ranking companies based on how ethical they are. How about ranking companies based on how effective they are in securing data? Give them a few more incentives. Make sure that Wall Street or the stock market is more sensitive to this aspect. So if a company is doing well in securing data, the stock prices are going up. I tell you what, the CEOs will stumble over each other to make that a priority because they understand stock prices very well. So some thinking has to be a little out of the box. We cannot keep doing what we have been doing because the reality has changed significantly. Yes, sir.
Can I talk basically?
Yes, please.
Cybersecurity, if I compare it with the nuclear threats, on the same footing, the United Nations and other similar global bodies, they do take those seriously by forming different organizations to address the issues with a uniform protocol. Now, if I compare the health and nuclear all of the same ground, we have a number of organizations there. Now, to protect all the government organizations, keep the commercial establishments and the enterprises off, is there any development or is there any issue? Because it's continuously changing. Is there any development there on the global scale?
I'm not sure I completely understood your question. Can you repeat once again?
Say the nuclear, we had the IEEA for the internationals. You have for the health, we have the WHO.
Right.
Even for the patents and other things, we have the WIPO kind of thing.
Right.
Now, when I am taking this cyber threat, similar to the having the potential threat as that of the nuclear,
right,
then definitely the global bodies like the organizations, United Nations,
right,
they should have a serious issue linked to this one.
Yes.
By forming uniform protocol so as to save the different government level and other organizations of people's interests.
Yes.
Okay, keep aside the commercial and the competing business sectors, etc.
Right.
That's my query.
Yeah, I follow. So, based on my awareness, there are
organizations in place, like I shared with you that framework, NIST framework, right? So there are organizations that are comprised of respected leaders who are coming together to set these standards. But mark my word, standards does not mean there is compliance. There are lots of software standards, but everybody doesn't comply with it. There is no conformity, there is no uniformity. Interesting, we have standards of standards, right? And cybersecurity is such a touchy area that countries are unwilling to sit down and come to a understanding of a common set of protocols, because everyone has certain things they are doing, they want to keep it keep it a secret. So I don't believe that level of recognition, that level of awareness, or that level of trust exists, whereby they are willing to sit down and openly discuss and say, okay, we need to find this. Because, like I said earlier, unfortunately, it is being used as a tool these days. Like, as you hear in the press, they are blaming a certain country for, tampering with the US elections. And I believe there are constant efforts on to try to see if they can launch attacks and so on and so forth. So, as opposed to coming together and saying, let's have a frank discussion, the approach is more covert approach, where they don't want to reveal all that they're doing behind the scenes. That's my thinking. Yes?
Just in developed nations,
Yes.
so developed nations, at least in certain cases, we have a data protection policy or some kind of framework. Although government policies and frameworks are behind the cover, just like as you said just now, but still at least a framework is there. But in India, we don't have any framework, any such framework. So can you suggest few key components that must be present in data protection policy framework in Indian context? And sir, I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Shall I say?
Yeah, please.
And I was just wondering that whether there is any difference between the data protection policy and cybersecurity policy and data sharing policy. A company should focus on framing one common policy, or it should highlight these three areas separately, or how it should be done.
Okay.
What is your suggestion?
Okay, so let's try to see the connections first. At the end of the day, when we talk about cybersecurity, we're talking about securing sensitive data. And like I said, you're securing sensitive data, you're securing the network over which data travels, you're securing the devices where data resides or data is accessed, you're securing the location, and you're securing the people, right? So that's the scope I see of cybersecurity. Now, data quality is another issue. But it is related, you're exactly right. Because, think about it from the control standpoint. If you don't have good controls in place, both software controls and administrative controls, then the likelihood of somebody going in and entering fraudulent data, right, creating a fraudulent transaction and siphoning off money is pretty high. And even that is a crime. That is an attack on the system. So, to achieve high level, in fact, you can kill two birds with the same stone, or whatever the phrase is. You can achieve both the goals by having a highly secure network, because then even that will ensure that only good data gets entered. For instance, to give you an example, one cardinal principle of maintaining high quality data is should never enter the same data more than once, right? Preferably, not even manually enter the data, scan the data in. So that is a standard principle that ensures good quality data is traveling through the system. At the same time, you also have to ensure that once the data is scanned in, it's traveling, it doesn't get intercepted. So that's when the encryptions and so on and so forth comes into play. So these are related. They are not separate policies, they are connected, but you should be able to first tease out the big picture and then drill into the specific aspects of it. To your point, do you realize that cybersecurity policy has to do something with the hiring policy?
Do you realize? When you are hiring, at least in the US, they do major background checks to make sure, let's say if you're being hired for a responsible position, they have found a correlation between your state of financial affairs and your potential of committing fraud. So when you sign the dotted line for that position, you agree that your finances will be checked on a regular basis just to make sure that you are not a threat yourself. Another example, this happened in a particular company. A software expert applied for a job of a janitor, gets hired, and then engages in, what's that word? Deep diving, right? Deep dives. Where basically goes into the garbage cans and starts getting access to data and using that to break into the network and committing all kinds of frauds. The company didn't do a great job of doing the background check, making sure that they are hiring the right person for the right job. So if you think about it, the implications of cybersecurity are so profound that companies who have really thought through all this make sure they check all the boxes, or dot all the I's and cross all the T's, as they say, to make sure at the end of the day they have a good cybersecurity policy in place. So there is more to cybersecurity policy than data quality, though they are highly interrelated. Now, in terms of what kind of, there are lots of policy frameworks out there. It's a matter of picking what is appropriate and then suitably kind of contextualizing it. What makes for a sound cybersecurity policy? Several aspects. First and foremost, a sound cybersecurity policy must be long-term. A sound cybersecurity plan must be consistent. It must be developed by people from different functions. It must address not only data, but it also must address related resources, network, devices, location, people. It must take a multi-pronged and holistic approach. So you're looking at different layers of security where you want the strongest possible protection at the first point of entry, and so on and so forth. So there are different elements that make for a sound cybersecurity policy or framework or program. And I'm sure, we can have a more focused discussion sidebar, because at this moment I'm thinking aloud and the answers may not be as rich as I would like them to be, but I appreciate the questions. Yes, sir?
Yeah, just with reference to this particular slide.
Okay.
One of your key pillars is securing the location.
Yeah.
But in the virtual world,
Yes.
the location of cybercrime keeps on changing. That is the origin of the crime. So in absence of a global policy, in absence of a global treaty among the various countries, how do you think that this securing of the location can be achieved?
Sure, good point. Now, this is treat these as generic standards. So when you're thinking securing location, you're thinking the server room, let's say. Or that's the way it's been thought, securing the server room. When I'm thinking securing the location, I'm thinking location could also include where a particular employee is with the device. That would also be the location. And that would imply certain policies, such as when I travel from the US, before I travel abroad, I have to get clearance from their compliance office. And they ask me questions like, what are you carrying with you? I say, I'll carry my laptop. What kinds of data are on your laptop? They ask me all these questions. So I had a sidebar with this guy, and they said, sir, once you go outside the nation, any country can confiscate your device and check anything they want. So preferably, if you could travel with a Chromebook with no data, go there, access the network and get data, that's a better form of securing or achieving the same goal.
So while these address different aspects of security, but you have to also contextualize it or suitably expand it to cover the different dimensions. So you're correct, location could be global. You can also think in terms of many companies these days, what they're doing, they're not allowing their executives to store sensitive data on the device. You can access the data, which is stored on a central server, and use it, but you can't store it. So at least to some extent, they are secure, because even if the device gets stolen or it's lost, they have a way of wiping it off or cutting it off, so they're not compromising the data in the server. So there are different ways that companies try to achieve it. Some companies will create secure zones and personal zones where they will monitor the secure zones using their IT people. So different ways they allow executives to keep having their mobile device. Some want only one, not two. Many companies will require you to have two, but some prefer one. So if you have one, then you have a personal, and you have a section, and then you have a professional section. They find different ways of trying to. So they identify a container, as the saying goes, secure the container, and they remotely monitor the container. So different ways. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Sir, I have a very simple question. Hacking, regarding hacking, there are so many papers available in the internet. Hacking is ethical or unethical? If it is ethical, then up to what level it is ethical? Because that hacking is related with cybersecurity.
Sure.
What is your answer?
Okay, so let me start with an example. Story. I like to say a little story. So I was a graduate student then, but I was teaching a class. Then I was assigned a grad assistant. He happened to be from India. So one weekend he writes to me and he says, "Mr. Chatterjee, guess what?" I said, "Guess what?" He says, "I can see all your student data." I'm like, "What?" He says, "Yes, I'm in the computer lab, I'm in your system, I can see all the data." So I said, "Call me." Call me. I'm like, "What's funny about it?" He says, "Oh, no, I was just having fun. And I'm part of a group. We get ranking points if we can break into different systems. So I thought of checking how sturdy or robust your university system was, but then I was able to quickly break into yours and I would see all the data." He wasn't going to do anything, but he was having fun. So then I called him into my office and I said, "You know what, just don't do this, and you're just getting yourself and myself into huge trouble." So it's not fun. It's serious business, and please do not hack for fun. So having shared that story, my gut reaction is, hacking in a way can have a positive purpose. It helps you learn code, helps you understand how systems work. It helps you identify vulnerabilities. So I see, from a positive side, I see this as it could be a positive approach to learning and innovation. It becomes unethical when you use it for negative purposes. So if you are breaking into people's systems, stealing data, and then using it in unfortunate ways, then it's unethical. So that's how I would describe hacking.
What is the future trend of cyber attacks?
I wish I knew.
Because when I see the papers, so that some new things are coming. So what is the future trend?
I don't claim to be an expert in triggering cyber attacks by any means, but my concern, as I said at the very beginning, my concern is you're going to see more and more infrastructure-focused attacks where they will destabilize the infrastructure. Now, my worst fear is if you wake up one morning and you see we no longer have internet access. The possibility of that is possibly slim to none because there are too many redundancies. That's not going to happen. But even if you were to scale back, I will not be surprised if there could be massive power outages where you have no power for days. There could be massive contamination. So basically, to answer your question, I'm sure as I'm talking, people there are already working towards compromising infrastructure. In fact, this morning there was an article on cybersecurity where they're talking about how to secure the grid. That's a huge, huge focus for what's to come. I hope we never come to that, but I don't know how you prevent it, because again, the systems are getting so much connected, or so connected. It's just a matter of finding one vulnerability and you can cause massive damage. All right, well, I once again greatly appreciate the opportunity. You are an amazing audience. It's a great honor to have spoken to you all. And like I said, I'm a very proud resident of Kolkata or Calcutta. And it was wonderful to be back, to be invited. And once again, thank you for your time, your patience, and I appreciate all the insights that you provided through your questions. Thank you again.
With this, we close today's seminar, and on behalf of our whole team, I want to thank Dr. Chatterjee for sharing his knowledge with us. And all the delegates are now invited for lunch to canteen. And I would request Professor Koshik and Professor Devabrata to escort Dr. Chatterjee to the canteen for lunch.
Can we have a snack?
Yes, sir.
We will have a snack.
At first, let us have a group photograph.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah.